Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from beautiful New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our Outer Realm journey for quite a few years now. So thank you, Folgers. We couldn't or wouldn't do it without you. Also, big thank you to Justin Snicker, a.k.a. Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, for his contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro that you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music streaming platforms. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre, but does phenomenal commission pieces of any sort. So tonight, we welcome back Dr. Rita Louise. She's definitely a fan favorite, that is for sure. And tonight, she's going to be talking about her book, Dark Angels, An Insider's Guide to Ghosts, Spirits, and Attached Entities. Now, there's a whole lot of stuff around that are involved around that. It's not so cut and dry. This girl really gets into some really deep stuff, and it's just fantastic. So I'm just sending her link now because she just finished doing her own show. So, I said, if you need to have a snack or something, you just feel free to do that, because honestly, my God, you got back-to-back shows. At least I had a breather between, the one I did earlier and this one. So hello, everybody. Catherine. Yes, Bubbles is definitely under the weather. So hello, Z-Sun. So she's not here this evening, and hopefully she'll be back at it, next week. So fingers crossed. It's not getting into the easiest time of year either for colds and such by any means. So 1 second here. It's gone. There we go. All right, we're good. So if you guys did not have a chance to tune in earlier this evening, I was hanging out on the Ethereal Encounters Unveiled, which is going to be every Thursday night from 5 to roughly 6:30 or 7 p.m. Terrific show. Just saying, not because I was on it as a guest, but okay, maybe help. But anyway, it was a really fantastic show. I think you guys moving forward are really going to love it. So check her out if you haven't, and give her some love. Tell her I sent you. Anyway. So tonight, without further ado, we welcome our special guest, Dr. Rita. We love her. She's a hoot. We're going to have a lot of fun. Going to get into a little bit of dark stuff with this amazing book of hers. And if you have any questions, line it up. We have all kinds of different channels up. I'm seeing that some of them are down for whatever reason, but hopefully they'll just pop back up. That would be nice. But the way this day's been going, I wouldn't hold my breath. Anyway, without further ado, Dr. Rita. Hello. Surprise.
Wait, I have a mouthful of food.
That's okay. That's okay. My God, back-to-back shows. I'm glad that you're here. So,
Well, it doesn't bother me, the back-to-back shows, but, and we talked about this before. I have my project house, and I spent a good solid 8 hours rolling primer on walls today. So my whole body is like,
oh no, that is terrible.
Like, okay. and I'm just eating dinner. So.
Oh no, no dinner and fumes. That'd be interesting. Make for interesting conversation.
So yay, thanks for having me back. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, that's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Honestly, this is a book. I'm just gonna put it up because it's just I love the cover. I just totally love the cover. It's very deceiving. Dark angels and you're like, oh, this is so nice. But it's really like there's some really detailed stuff in here. So I have to ask, what would I would say possess is to keep in the theme of everything, but what would prompt you to write the book? Was it because you had experiences yourself at some point in your life or
So when I decided to write the book, I had been working with a paranormal group, Metroplex Paranormal Investigations, before, it was a thing. I mean, before even Ghost Hunters or Ghost Hunters was just starting.
right.
And, and the book is kind of broken up into three sections. One is talking about just ghost hunting and, different things that you might encounter, dealing with water, dealing with ley lines, blah, 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 stuff like that.
Yeah.
The second part of the book really gets into the whole concept of attached entities, because I rated I was on this show and I was hijacked by 5 people. And this one woman could not get past the name of the book. And I was supposed to be talking about medical intuition. And she goes, but you have this book, Dark Angels. What makes the angels be dark?
Oh boy.
And that was a half hour of defending my title. And, and I tried to explain to her that, to me, there's a spectrum, with angel like God, and
Yes.
then angels, and then spirit guides, and then there's like your basic ghost, and then you get your attached entities and your possessions, and and you move down this list until, they get increasingly darker. And I don't really talk about spirit guides. I only talk about ghosts and more negative things. So.
Yeah.
They're dark angels because they're beings without bodies.
Right.
So, anyway.
Right. No, not what people would think. Because when I think, people think angels are dark angels, they're thinking of the spiritual conditioned fallen angels, which were just a bunch of baddies and, maybe misunderstood. I don't know. But, because I've heard that theory before. They're just misunderstood. It's like, well, okay, maybe they're aliens. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to respond to that.
All right.
In the mythic record,
Yes.
you find, we all think of Satan, but there is Kronos, who battled with Zeus, the sky god.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And Kronos lost. And he was sent to the depths of Tartarus, which was deep within the earth. And he was vilified. But that guy, and you find the same character across mythology, always had his own opinion. And, warned, you have, and I can't remember the god's name. It's been a long day. But you have like Noah is warned of the flood, and in Arpa who's the Noah, the Sumerian Noah, is warned of the flood, and so it's by the same basically character that you find in Kronos. And so he didn't do anything wrong except go against the narrative that the other guys had. And his goal was to help out humanity and look out for humanity. So if you think that's evil, but he just followed his own drummer.
Right. No, I agree with you completely because I feel so much is conditioned and so much of it has been borrowed. And, we just are conditioned to believe certain things. I always say, if you're a person of faith and religion, you're going to believe in this. And if you are, let's say, no, everything's an alien, then you're going to believe that a demon in this hand might be a reptilian in this hand because they both look big, scary. They growl, they stink.
I don't know. I haven't got that close.
Yeah, it's like I smell sulfur. Well, what I understand is grace can smell like that too. So, there are a lot of similarities, I think, in both worlds that tend to get bounced around. So you don't really know what you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So anyway, but okay. So again, you're with a paranormal team. Have you had experiences in your life to make you kind of go like, why would you be with a paranormal team? It's just like a case study for the book.
So no. So I grew up in a haunted house, and there
Okay.
was the dead guy that lived in the basement, and everybody knew about the dead guy.
Right.
And my mother would hang laundry in this one area of the basement where the dead guy was, and he was a residual energy ghost.
Okay.
But you would go down there, and you could walk down this hallway. I mean, because there was like a hallway that went to a cold room. You know, it was a very
Right.
old house.
Yeah, like a cold storage room. Yeah.
And halfway down the hallway was the energy of the dead guy. You know, and that's where the clotheslines were, and it was like, I don't want to go. Nobody wanted to go in the basement.
Your own dang clothes, mother.
That's where like the extra refrigerator was, and the freezer was, and you would have to go down there to get stuff, or I'd have to go take the clothes off the clothesline. Which I would get in trouble because I would just be like, eek, 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 and just pull them down because you broke a bunch of clothes clips. And I'm like,
Dead guy. Right.
okay, so there was that.
Right.
Well, we all called him the dead guy.
Right.
And I did find out, and whether this is true or not, so Mr. Gruberg, who owned the delicatessen around the corner that we frequented all the time, said that someone had been murdered in that house. And I'm like, it was the dead guy.
I know that guy. Right.
It was in the basement.
Oh.
Like right here, dead guy. So,
Oh.
but then I went away to college, and I'm already like totally spooked about ghosts, you know,
Right.
and I'm like, and I moved into this house, and it was like so I went to school in Oswego, New York. And so Oswego, New York had the record snowfall for the continental United States year after year after year after year. So 13 feet of snow was not abnormal.
Right.
So this house was in a great location right on the main street. It was 5 blocks from the downtown area, which was where the supermarket was. It was on the bus line. I mean, and the rent was cheap and the place was nice. And I'm like, sure, I'll move in. Utilities were included, which was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then after being in there a few weeks, I went to this bar to have a drink, you know, because there were only so many bars. So you got to know people. And one of the townies was like, so where do you live? And I said, on the corner of 5th and Bridge. He goes, oh, the old funeral parlor. So of course,
lucky girl.
well, of course, my face turned white. And my roommates were all theater majors, so they were always gone. And I was a design student, so I was always working on some kind of a project. And I would be there, and I'm trying to take a kind of long story short. I would hear like footsteps come up the stairs, or you would be in your room and you would hear like a knuckle tapping or something tapping on the wall, walking down the hallway. I mean, just turn the music up louder. And so my room, even for my roommates, it was the safe room. And this is before I had been reading some metaphysical stuff. I mean, we're freaking 18.
Yeah.
And so in my room, I just like filled it with light. And that light blocked the door. And so none of them spooks could come into my room.
Door is locked, off limits.
And so my roommate, who was across the hall, I lived in that apartment for a year, and I literally went into her bedroom 3 or 4 times because it had the worst energy, the worst. Only to find out that that was a viewing room. And it's like, and so if she would freak out, because she had more activity happening in her room, she would come into my room to just be safe. You know?
It's like, am I the only one excited at living like in a complete funeral home?
No. And so, so ghosts scared me. And, things that go bump in the night scare me. And so I'm sorry, my dog has just been like hyper vigilant the last couple of days, and I really don't understand.
It's okay. The show I did before this, I was a guest, and the host dog was just losing its mind. I'm laughing. I'm like, I just love it. I do. I love it. It's fine.
And so, but then I went to the Berkeley Psychic Institute and studied with them. And one of the things that you could do was they had these other little groups. And one of the groups was a house healing team. And so a little group of psychics would go into a house and we would walk around and feel the house and look for ghosts and vortexes and whatever, because usually someone would call because they had an issue. And we would do our assessment and then do a healing on the house. And so, so my attitude changed, because it's kind of like, oh yeah, there's a ghost over there, and oh, there's a vortex over there, and oh, you got spiders coming out of the vortex, and I mean, just you would see weird stuff.
Right.
And so I overcame my fear of there's a ghost standing over there. That doesn't bother me, but don't make a loud noise.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you can see ghosts with the lights on. And if you want me to go in there with the light off, somebody has to come with me, because I am sure not going by myself.
But that's the thing. And I'm glad you said that, because why do the lights have to be off? If you're haunted, you're haunted. Like, we had a haunted, we talk about, we had a big haunted manor house, and people love to come and film there, and things are always happening. Our spirits freaking loved attention. They drop coins through the ceiling, and people would be just like, and I'm like, what about when I'm just home by myself? Why don't I get any coins? But it happened at any given time of the day. Why at night? Is it because your senses are heightened, or makes the blinky lights look better? Like what?
I got nothing. I got nothing. I mean, because we would do these investigations and all the lights would be off, and I would walk into like a bedroom and I'd be like, click.
Right.
And the team member was like, what are you turning the light on? I'm like, do you want me to go in there?
Where's my nightlight?
Pretty much.
Oh gosh. I don't know. I don't know. I don't mind them light or dark, but it's just the concept of, I've seen, like, our house, crazy things would go on at any given time of the day. Door would swing open. Somebody would look at you and go, hello. And I'm like, hello. It's like, here you are. I don't think I know that voice. It doesn't seem to matter what time of the day, but everything just seems to be the conditioning thing.
Well, actually, I'm going to throw something out. When it starts getting later and at night, there's less, and I'm going to say psychic energy happening on the planet. Mm-hmm. There's less of, we all emit emotional energy. Correct. And so when everybody's awake, there's a lot of energy flying around the planet. And so that does quiet down, doesn't make the ghost come or go, but.
Mm-hmm. Right. I could see how your mind can run away with you at night or in the darkness, for sure. Some people say, oh, it's a temperature thing, depending on where you're located. I don't know. I just find, like, I can have a nap during the day and I'm still getting the same sort of activity, at least at our home. In investigating, it just seems to be, let's just do it at night, get the night vision out, get the flashlights and blinky lights. And I'm just sitting there like, okay.
I mean, I've done daytime investigations. And you still turn up the same stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't know if it's like from a filming perspective. I mean, because I never do equipment ever. If you get better resolution using far infrared or whatever, having that be at night, I don't know.
I don't know. I've filmed both night and day, and I mean, if you're going to get something, if you're meant to get something, you're going to get it at any given point. I think you either have a rapport with the spirits who are there, and if you ask half-witted questions, well, you're going to get maybe nothing, or you're going to antagonize somebody. Try to be aware of your surroundings. Try to look up the history. Try to look at old photographs. Interact on a proper level. I would find any given time of the day, investigations would be pretty successful. So, what to you, as we're going through, as per what's in the book, so we're going down through this hierarchy. Who are ghosts to you? What is your perception of a ghost?
Just dead people, beings without bodies,
Dead guys. Right.
The dead guy.
Dead guys.
But a being without a body,
Okay.
and a lot of the ghosts, when you hit a ghost, a lot of the times they're just residual energy, so it doesn't mean that there's any consciousness to them, but they walk down this hallway a million times, or they stood in front of the stove, all the time, and they've left an imprint there that's still detectable. So there's not anything mean or malice, but I don't know that I've ever interacted. Well, no, I have to take that back. Okay, I'm going to take that back. So what I was going to say is that I never met a ghost that was like a happy ghost, but I'm going to take that back. So I lived in this house, and I had a shadow spirit that lived in the backyard. And I called him Tom because I like to give them names. And it was the house that I bought was built in the 70s, and I bought the house from the original owner. Okay. And it was this lady, and her husband died, and his name was Tom or Bob, or it was some very simple name. Well, he liked to have a very manicured, sculptured, like the bushes were round and, pretty shaped and well manicured. Not my yard. I could barely get my husband to freaking mow the lawn. And he did not like that particularly. But he lived in the backyard, and my office was an addition, and it was just like a glass room, and it had a lot of windows that looked into the backyard. So I'd be working, and you'd see something go by, and so finally I figured out what was going on, and I named him Tom, and so it wasn't freaking me out.
Right.
And so I already thought that was, kind of cool and weird. But then my husband started talking about this guy in the backyard. So that was okay. Then my kids started saying, "Who's that guy in the backyard?"
Great.
Oh, no. But it gets better, 'cause they were stuck with me, and one of my kids was like, because my dog died, "I keep seeing Kiko in the hallway," which is a dog,
right?
And
that's good to know.
I really appreciated that, but
right. What does that mean? Like your dog's just stuck, or just happy to be. I'm home,
ready to go, pretty much. But where it started getting really weird, Michelle, is I would have people come over. I always have like a Super Bowl party, and halfway through the evening, someone would pull me to the side and go, "There's somebody in your backyard," and I'd be like, "Oh, that's Tom," and they'd look at me like, "You're not even going to investigate?" It's like, "Oh no, he's a dead guy that lives out there."
And some shadow guy that likes to hang out and lurk in the shadows.
And make my husband feel guilty for not mowing the freaking yard.
Right. That's a whole other show, man. I know.
See, this is how I get after I like work for 8 hours solid, and then like come home and try to relax and clean paint off and put makeup on, and then do an hour show. And today I talked about Medicare.
Oh, nice.
It's ugly. It's ugly.
Total great spooky month conversation.
So I was all like hyped from that. So.
Hyped up from that. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you are in fine form, and I love it. So, okay. Constance says, "What about orbs? Flashes of light, transparent images, shadow." Wow, that was Tom. We were just talking about Tom the shadow.
The shadow spirit.
But on an average, some shadows can be pretty hostile. So I guess you're fortunate.
Oh no, I was very glad that he was a nice guy. you know,
Right.
and just kind of like just stayed in the yard. You didn't come in the house ever.
Stay in the yard. Yeah.
Uh, you know, I have mixed feelings about orbs. You
Me too.
know, I mean, I really buy that it's a dust particle, but then people like blow them up and they're like, look, there's a face in it. It's like,
Pareidolia. No, I won't say it doesn't happen, but there's a lot. You're right. There are a lot of scientific things that can be an orb: pet dander, dust, pollen, moisture, right? So what about like a true spirit orb? Do you believe in true spirit orbs?
I mean, I'm not going to discount that a spirit could take on that ethereal form,
Mm-hmm.
you
Right.
know, but separating that out from everything else, or just saying, oh, look, there's orbs in the picture and, you know, must be a lot of spirits.
Well, people used to send me pictures when they were camping in the summer, and they were terrified to go back. You know, in some cases, not every case, and they just said, "Oh my God, this place is infested. You need to investigate it." And I'm seeing it under a tree in the summer, and you're sitting having a bonfire. I'm thinking, I think, but possibly that may not be anything that.
It's just bugs, probably.
Well, you can get bugs, and you can get, you know, like I said, there's a whole bunch of other reasons, right? So it's difficult. Like I think if you get a true spirit orb, it's not going to be another 100 blotchy things
Right.
in a picture, right? Like so, but
So I hold my judgment. I usually just don't say
yeah,
anything because I don't really, I
right,
have not found any evidence
right,
concrete one way or the other.
right. But that's the paranormal on average.
No,
There's
because you know, like talking to ghosts at your house, not mine.
right.
Uh,
And
is
talk to my dead guy, right? So
I
no,
already have two ghosts in my house, and that's plenty. So
right. It is. It's very difficult. I mean, I think that's where parapsychology comes in, you know, where you try to find the logical reasons for everything. I think it's easy for people to think that there is a really malevolent entity. Um, you know, I've investigated places and I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure this is psychokinesis. And it's a very delicate thing to say to somebody they're projecting energy. I like to think we're really incredibly powerful beings that we can project this energy under certain conditions. So some people don't take too lightly to that. So I would just send off a bunch of links talking about psychokinesis. You say, if you happen to see yourself with some of this stuff going on, maybe we can explore this a little further because it's a really, you know, it's scientific and it's a
well, and
part of life, but it's really touchy subject.
I mean, but it can happen.
Sure. Yeah.
But you know, the cases of it happening, you know, this is what I always have to tell people. You know, the case chance of it happening, you know, are pretty small. It's not like every situation is this.
No.
As an example, you know, so Michelle, I don't know how old you are, but back in the
I'm
day,
old.
you know, and I know you've been in this field for a long time, you know, everybody would blame all of their woes on their past lives. You know, I had in my 25th past life in Atlantis, I stubbed my toe and that's why my toe hurts. It's like, okay. But people have let that go. You know, that's not like the main cause of issues in their lives. You know, for a long time, it was entities. You know, oh, I must have an entity attachment. You know, and that's why my life sucks. And it's like, no, your life just sucks.
You can't always blame it on the poor entity. I thank television every day for just letting the world think that I think everything's a demon.
You know,
No.
I did this radio interview.
Right? How about no? No. It's tough when you're logical, you know, it just sort of gets stereotyped. But no, I do agree. I mean, there are things out there without a doubt. I think projection of energy is a really big thing. And yeah, it would be more like poltergeist. Poltergeist essentially is projection of energy.
So, you know, I had a poltergeist actually two situations. All right, here's the story. This is a good one.
Okay.
So I was living in an apartment. I had just moved to Texas, and all right, I have this weird poodle thing. So I like had this collection of. I can put Raylan up here. And he can,
I got a poodle.
and so I had a collection of these 1950s ceramic spaghetti poodles. Which now I have an entire poodle room, but that was my collection. And I had a lot because in California, apparently they were very popular. And every time you'd go to an antique store or a flea market, I'd always find one or two or three. And so I had those shelves, like, so you hang the rails on the wall, and then there are the things that those shelves that you stick in.
I know those. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I had, and there were 4 shelves, and they were covered in these vintage poodles. So I come home one day, and the middle, or the second shelf and the third shelf were off the wall. I had a coffee table, or I'm measuring here, but that was about 3 feet wide, and the boards were on the sofa on the other side of the coffee table. And the bottom shelf was still intact, and 1 or 2 of the poodles were knocked over.
A nerve.
Well, it was just like, how the heck? But I found out that there were repair people in the apartment that day, like they were scheduled. So I went down to the office with the top of a box with all my broken poodles, like
projection.
Oh, no. I mean, it was probably about $2,000 worth of poodles. I mean, it was. I mean, there were a lot that broke.
Right.
And you know, it was a lot of years of collecting. So anyway, so I'm just dealing with them, and then a couple of nights later, at like 3 o'clock in the morning, I hear this bam. The second and the third shelf were off the wall on the sofa again. The bottom shelf was still intact. I mean, they didn't just fall down; they flew.
Right.
Except it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was home.
Wow.
And it was just me. But I had a friend who was kind of witchy, who was pissed off at me when all of this happened.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
So a little bit of projection energy coming from afar.
She took out my poodles.
The nerve. Wow. Hit you where it hurts. The poodles. Right. Wow. That's really, that's just wrong. Just leave the poodles alone. No, that's just wrong. But you see what I mean? Energy, a projection of energy is pretty powerful. And just talking about poltergeist activity earlier, how, you know, let's say you're sitting and you get into an argument with somebody in a room, you make up, you go out, come back a couple of hours later, wondering why you're feeling foul because you're in the same room, that energy's still there, you know. So over time, it just builds and it builds. I would imagine it would obviously be the same with a projection of energy, like a poltergeist are not spirits. It is a self-projected energy. Mm-hmm. So, you know, how, in your opinion, does this build up to be something, you know, like the ancient Ram Inn, you know, in England? That thing has been there for, they figure, centuries. Mm-hmm. A poltergeist. So what does it just build up, and it throws people out of bed. That person who initially projected that and started the whole ball rolling is long gone, right? So how does it just keep powering up in the energy of others? Or,
you know, I mean, it could be your own energy, you know, where you allow yourself, and I'm going to say it this way, to go down the rabbit hole, you know. So there's your normal waking being, and then something happens and you get triggered and you get into your own deep emotional place where it just becomes darker and darker and darker on the inside, you know. And I mean, I used to visit my rabbit hole. I know how dark it can get. And I'm sure that for some people, it got even darker. And then, you maybe throw in some mental issue, or that the person is just very powerful, and we were talking about past lives, and I'm going to throw this in, or they've had past lives where they've done that kind of stuff, they practice magic, they practice witchcraft, so even if they're not doing it on a conscious level, it's like their body remembers, and so they might say, oh, well, I've never studied that, but it doesn't mean that their body doesn't naturally
The
behave.
core of the essence, right?
Right.
It's part of their energy.
Right.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. I think that's where you get people who bring that forward, maybe life after life, who can just keep expanding on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can only use myself for an example because I can't obviously step into everybody else to see, how it is for them. But my family has always called us like energy movers. And this is going back to my grandparents and their parents. And I do things and I'm often just shown what to do. I just do things. Well, how'd you do that? I don't know. I have somebody who just today goes, do you remember when, because I do a lot of light work. Do you remember when we did this the other day? And I'm going, no, I know we worked. I know we did something, like earthly, but then we just really got focused on it. I'm like, oh yeah, we did do that.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't have recollection of a lot of it. It's just, I think becomes instinctive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, there have been lifetimes of working with it and doing it. So it's just part of who you are, or it's an energy that is very easy for you to tap into. Well, like when I lived in the funeral parlor, I mean, I didn't read anything about filling the room with light. And I mean, it was a golden light and it was just solid. It was just, that's what I felt like I needed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think you just go with what feels
Mm-hmm.
natural, you know. So I don't know. I love energy work. I think I took it up. I've always been able to do it, but it wasn't until, you know, probably getting into this field, I'm realizing, oh, you can do things. And if you ever said to me, doing like planetary stuff, well, you would do this after so many years of paranormal work. I'd say, I don't know how to do that. I would never do that. Apparently, I'm pretty good at it. It's just like,
Uh-huh.
oh, hey, So I don't know. Yeah, I think we all find our thing. Energy is a very curious thing to me. When you factor in that everything, as per Nikola Tesla, is supposed to be vibration and frequency, you
Mm-hmm.
would think it would be natural for all of us.
But everybody has their channel, everybody has their
Yeah.
skill.
Hmm.
All right, I don't want to say everybody, most people. I mean, we're all able to send, receive, and manipulate energy.
We're
We're
little
all able to,
antennas. Yeah.
but some people are more in tune with it and are better at it, kind of like drawing or dancing, and
Hmm.
other people not so much.
Hmm.
And I think some of it has to do with how sensitive you are. If
Hmm.
you're a highly sensitive person or an empath or whatever, that you're just more open to that energy.
Hmm.
But I have a girlfriend, Carol Lehman, and her line was, everybody has a channel. I always give her credit for this, that word channel. And so, my primary channel is being a clairvoyant. I'm a very visual person,
Hmm.
and I'm very kinesthetic. So I feel what you're feeling, which when you do a lot of health work is not real fun, because it's
No, because you're very empathic, right?
well, it's just like, oh, I'm guessing you have a headache because now my head hurts.
Right.
So those are my primary channels. And over the years, my auditory has really opened up, but that didn't work at all for forever.
Hmm.
But some people go, oh, well, but I'm not an empath. It's like, but that might not be your channel. And
Hmm.
figuring out what your channel is and what's working for you is more important. You might be an empath. You might be a clairvoyant. You might be clairaudient.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, Speaking of clairaudient, because a lot of people often want to talk with their guides. You know, you hear that a lot. Well, I just want to be able to communicate with my guides. And people have the impression that their guides are like standing over there, you know, in the little cloud with a trumpet. Do, 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 do. Hey, Michelle, pay attention to me. Here I got wisdom for you.
My guides apparently say I don't listen to anything, so it would not be my guides.
Okay.
Right.
But if you're not auditory,
Right.
you're not going to ever hear that.
Right.
And so for me, I've learned that, I mean, they talk to me now and they just are very interesting. You know, they would just put an image in my head, you know, as an example. And in my new book, Dang, It Was Me All Along, I tell this story. So it was right before Christmas. I mean, literally right before Christmas. And I go to run the dishwasher and it won't start. Well, it kind of started and then it just stopped. And I open it up and there's like 4 inches of water in the bottom. So I call the repair guy, and it was right before Christmas and he was going out of town for a couple of weeks. And I live in a little town, and finding somebody that is worthwhile to have come right before the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking I need to get rid of the murky liquid that's in the bottom of the dishwasher. And I'm going, okay. So I have like a coffee cup and some ShamWow towels, which I love, and a bucket. And so I'm like trying to scoop with the coffee cup, and I'm getting like a quarter of a cup, it was just not working.
You need a shop vac.
Well, I didn't have one. And that's in my mind. And so, you know, internally, because if you ask a question, you get an answer.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, what would be something better to use? And the image, not the words, the image that came to mind was a turkey baster.
Ah,
and I'm
brilliant.
Like, oh, that's pretty good. And it took me about 20 minutes to turkey baste all the water out of the bottom.
See, that's brilliant. I get images as well. I find it frustrating sometimes because you're supposed to put them all together. Like if you're trying to, you know, put a sentence together, they give you a bunch of pictures. Which one goes first? Wait, slow down. Sometimes it's just be easier for you to hear them. Right. So, but yeah, I agree. I think I know first rules of even mediumship when people are trying to teach you. Like I used to spend a lot of time in Lilydale. I loved it. It's a great place for me to decompress and just to listen to other people and their journeys and so on. And they're like, okay, you know, I sat and spent time with John Holland, and he's like, okay, this is how you start working with the images and stuff like that. And I said, well, I don't really like that way. You know, we would talk about that. And apparently this is how they teach it to people. Open up and just look for images and colors. So it's just like, okay. I had a shift one year. So I want to go. I wanted to go back to the pictures. I said, I don't like this way. I want to go back that way. He goes, you can't. You're evolving. I don't want to evolve. I want to go back to my pictures. Like, you know, so appreciate what you have. Let's just say that. So, you know, because you can't go back, apparently. It just takes you a while. You have to incorporate everything, and that takes skill. So anyway, I don't know. But there's a question for you. Alan, can you ask Dr. Rita what she thinks about the human aura?
Stuff. I think stuff.
There you go, Alan.
That was technical. No, I mean, so the aura is the electromagnetic field around our body, and it's our personal space. And so if somebody invades our aura, we feel it, because anything that's inside of our auric field, we take ownership of. Mm-hmm. And we'll come back to this. Ask me about attached entities and the aura, because you're great lead-in.
Right.
And, you know, and so from a very technical perspective, you know, there are 7 layers to the aura, you know, and that's per astral body. And we have 4 astral bodies, and it takes information, it processes it from the world around us into our physical body and then back, which is how we can send and receive energy from, you know, from the world. And that happens via the chakras. See, I wrote a whole book on this topic. So avoiding the cosmic 2x4.
Right.
And, But the aura holds the pictures that we're currently processing, and so where the physical body and the chakras hold, I'm going to very simplify this, more the emotional energy. If there's something that we're actively working on now, we tend to carry it in our auric field. It's kind of like a little post-it note. We have a post-it note like, oh yeah, I need to deal with that, or oh yeah, I need to deal with that. But it's our first line of defense. And I could keep going, and I'll just stop there. If he has a follow-up question and wants something more specific, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, Jennifer would like a follow-up and would like to know how you can do aura cleansing.
Trying to think if I have a video of that. I do not. So to me, but I do have a thing on this. So to me, the first thing that someone needs to do is to be able to ground themselves. So in order to clear your aura, you first need to be grounded. So on my webpage, soulhealer.com, that's soulhealer.com.
Right there.
And in the search engine, or in the little search thingy on there, just write grounding, and it'll take you to this article like reclaiming your calmness by making a grounding cord. I don't know. It's the first one that always comes up. And in that, there's actually an MP3 file that you can listen to learn how to make a grounding cord. So it's not like listening to a YouTube guided meditation. I mean, it kind of is, but it's more to teach you how to do it, and hopefully after listening to it a couple of times, or if you're really feeling stuck, then you'll just sit there and go, okay, make a grounding cord. Okay, grounding cord, set it on release. And, because you can sit there and try to I like to use a squeegee or a spatula and cleanse my aura with like Windex. But if that stuff doesn't have anywhere to go, aka your grounding cord, then you're just stirring it up and not really getting any results.
Right. You're just kind of stirring the stew pot a little bit. That's about it. So I agree with Constance as well. Hugging a tree, walking in nature, that's earthing. Just putting your feet to the ground and connecting up. There's a lot of different great grounding techniques, but I love earthing. I think it's a good way to interchange your energy, because trees are very sentient and they communicate with one another, and you are basically putting out your energy, and it's kind of like they're sharing their own at the same time, which is all wonderful. So book details. I just put the website. It's scrolling across the bottom, but I just put it in the chat, so you can find your books on your website. Is that correct? There you go.
On my website and Amazon, all the regular places. And that book, I'm pretty sure, is also available in a Kindle version.
Perfect. So go dig it up right there. Make it nice and easy for you. Link is right in whatever platform you are watching. So thank you. So let's talk about these energies, these attachments, these entities that like to just infiltrate and, attach themselves and create havoc, pain in the rear end.
Guys of the spirit world.
The bad guys, baddies. I like that. Poodle destroyers. So, all right.
So they're definitely on a level below ghost, working their way down there.
Right.
And many times, wait a minute, you know what? I have to make a commentary before we move on to those. There are a lot of instances where a ghost will turn up, but it's like grandma, or I had this one lady, and it was at a ghost conference, and people freaked her out because her brother kept showing up, but it was her twin brother, and he was just around her all the time. And they were like, she needs to get rid of him. And, they made it just be this very negative thing versus her twin brother being around to just be around her. Okay. But there's a difference between a person that died and went through the process, went to the light, all of that, and decided, because they don't lock you in heaven. Just saying. I mean, some people seem to think that they lock you up in heaven. You know, you can leave and get a day pass and come hang out in the chair. You know, the guy that wouldn't mow the grass, his dad showed up at this house we bought together, just sitting in the kitchen. Never met the man. Like, I think your dad's here. He only showed up one time, the day we were moving in. He was sitting in the kitchen.
Crazy.
And, you know, so they do that. They'll come visit.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yes.
And so that's cool.
Yes.
But when you're talking about an attached entity, usually they have not gone into the light, you know, and they tend to be more earthbound spirits. And I'm just kind of talking, because there are multiple kinds, but tend to be earthbound spirits. They tend to take on a human form. They speak human. And but they're the narcissists of the spirit world. You know, they are. They're like, you know, in people, we talk about energy vampires, you know, and there's people that just like want to talk to you for forever, or what, you know, everybody knows somebody that's an energy vampire, you know, and they're like the energy vampires of the spirit world. And their goal is to control and manipulate your space and to get you to do things so that they can get fed. And the entity will tie themselves to some aspect of your emotional energy. You know, so if you think I suck, and, you know, like that's some of your internal programming that you're walking around with, and something happens that somebody makes you feel stupid, which is activating your I suck core belief, and an entity, if you have an attached entity, it will attach to, like, it's like you rang the bat phone and you call the entity in, and then it will cause you to trigger more and take you further and further down the rabbit hole of I suck, and it can just keep sucking energy off of you so it can be fed.
No, I mean, some people, you know, I mean, there's different types of entities that do that. I guess they're the ones that keep stirring up the pot to keep the negativity flowing, because that energy is, you know, they can feed off that. It makes them stronger. If you have an addiction, they'll keep, you know, creating the addiction. If you have mental illness, they'll keep preying on that. If you have anxiety, they'll prey on that, right?
But that is the manipulation. They manipulate you to be in that emotional vibration.
Yes.
You know, I mean, there's the addiction, but the addiction just makes the person be more prone to be in that emotional vibration. You know, because I have people that come and they're like, well, I went to like all these healers and it went away for a while, but then it came back. And I'm like, it's because you didn't fix the reason it was there in the first place. The reason it's there in the first place is because blah, 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 you know, whatever their issue is. And I'm like, and until you heal that, you're not ever going to get rid of them. Because then it won't have anything to feed off of.
So what about mindset? Because I agree with Richard here, only if you allow it. So can you, I mean, when you say that, some people, you know, they sometimes you don't even realize it's happening right away. But I'm a strong believer in mindset to say, you know, taking control, noticing.
Most of the time, people that have an entity attachment do not realize that they have it.
Okay. That's what I wanted to go with.
You know what I mean? And they only operate when you're triggered. Now, alcohol can be the trigger. You know, I had one client, well, actually it was the mother, that every time he would get on the computer, he would sit there and start like looking all these conspiracy sites and whatever, and it would trigger paranoia in him. And then it would be like a month and he wouldn't leave his apartment. He would always be on the internet, and he would just spiral down because of the paranoia that it created. And it's like, well, that's because, you know, he got triggered and now the entity is totally in control of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about an attached entity, so there's something called dissociation, so the ultimate form of dissociation is dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder. Everybody's heard of that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when that happened, it's that you as spirits, your consciousness leaves the body and goes over there because over there is safe. And so when you're not in the body,
Mm-hmm.
some other entity can come and kind of take charge. And so depending on how much you dissociate, and to what level will depend on how much that control they can get. And so usually people that, so dissociation is usually tied to let me think, the freeze response. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the freeze response where you just stop and you look at things like a deer in the headlights, and so you as spirit, you just check out, because you don't want to be there. You don't want to listen to it. Okay. I talk about this in the book, so I'll just, I had an attached entity for years, got him when I was a kid. His name was George.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I grew up in a pretty toxic household. My mom would yell at me a lot, and I got very good at, as I like to call it, I would turn down the volume. And mentally, in my mind, I would take the knob and go, and turn the volume down, and she would be yelling, and I would be over there thinking about something else.
Tune out a frequency.
But it made it be a safer space for me to be in.
Mm-hmm.
But in hindsight, I was totally dissociated from what was going on. I was not in the here and now. I was not there present with her. I was over there. And so usually people that have entity attachment issues are people that have the freeze response and tend to dissociate.
That's actually really interesting. I could see that. When you're dealing with the narcissist ghost, that whole thing too. So that's a show and a half. But okay. So aside from like other type of entities, aside from that would attach, like something interdimensional, dimensional.
So there's the ones that take on corporeal form. I've interacted with what I call alien entities that don't speak human. I had the devil guy. He's one of my personal favorites. I had,
right.
And he was just like an alien entity, and I've dealt with a few of those. I had this one lady. This one was so interesting. So she had these interdimensional beings, but they look like, and the best way I can describe them is they look like dragonflies.
Oh.
And they flew around her space.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. They flew around her space. And, so I'm doing energy work on her, and I'm like, and I'm catching these dragonflies, and then a little portal in her aura would open up and more would come in. And she was 100% aware of it. And when I finally told her what was going on, she goes, that's exactly it. Maybe not the dragonfly thing, but this stuff flying around her all.
Yes. So how do you deal with it?
More challenging. Dealing with vortexes and portals in your auric field, a lot harder to address.
But okay, let's talk about that. How do you open it? How do you close it if it's within your aura field that you've created this?
Because
you would think we would be able to say
we created it. The person has inadvertently created it. I don't think people intentionally create.
No, of course not. Yeah. No.
And I have not come up with, I'll just say it this way, I have not come up with a way to seal the portal. I've gotten them to close and the person gets some relief, but there's obviously something a lot deeper going on with them. But it's a much deeper level. I had this one woman who she had, so there was my own entity issue. And for some reason, long before I wrote this book, I started getting all these clients with entity attachments. I mean, like hardcore entity attachments. And I had this one woman who had like 7 entities in her space. And one I called the Big Kahuna because he was just like some big Hawaiian-y looking guy, but he controlled the show. And so it turned out that the woman did automatic writing. And so, you know, and you know, it kind of goes up there with Ouija boards. You know, people are like, oh, don't use a Ouija board. And it's like, well, it depends on your intention of using the Ouija board. And so she was doing the automatic writing and she was getting all these great insights. And now she is seeking out the automatic writing. I'm really trusting it. And now what's coming through starts to change and it starts to become more negative, but she doesn't walk away from it because, you know, it was they were good and they were kind and they gave me all this information. I mean, it's the very narcissistic thing, you know,
of course.
Yeah. Nice, and then we turned happy, you know, and I wasn't really up on like the narcissistic life cycle to find out if after if she would ever get done and want to leave and they change their attitude and they're all nice again. I never asked her that, but that would be really interesting.
Because it's a form of possession at the end of the day. She's allowing someone to step into her or control her.
Anybody that has an entity attachment has allowed it on some level or another. Not that they intentionally did it,
right?
But they, you know, but they inadvertently have done it. Let me grab a lozenge real quick.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so anybody just listening in on Rumble, because I see a lot of you over there, you may not realize that you can actually comment on Rumble and it will come through to our soundboard as well. So we can see your comments. We can ask if you have questions, we can address them. So this, you know, because Rumble, we've only started using this over the last probably month. And we've had a few people come through. So just so you all know, you can definitely do that. And while we're at it and waiting for Dr. Rita, for those just tuning in, you're listening to the Outer Realm Radio with our special guest, Dr. Rita Louise, talking about her book, Dark Angels, An Insider's Guide to Ghost Spirits and Attached Entities. We're broadcasting live on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM from New Orleans, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast. And we thank you very much. And we thank our sponsors, Folgers Coffee, Justin Snicker, Steve McGinnis. We appreciate you all so, so very much. So I think she's back. Are you ready? Yes? Good. Okay, good.
I'm like, okay, swallow.
Get a pizza roll in there. No.
All right, a lozenge and a pizza roll are not a good flavor combination.
No.
Share with everyone. Don't do it.
Oh, exactly. Alan had a comment, and I definitely would love to hear your thoughts on it. I've never understood why people are so afraid of Ouija boards. Movies, perhaps?
Okay, so I was just talking about the automatic writing, which I told, you know, and what created the issue for her was this dependency on receiving messages.
Right.
And I could see with a Ouija board where at some point in time there were people that were using it and getting good messages coming through, and they had the same dependency on it, and then it got a really bad reputation, you know. And so for some reason it shifted from this intentionality of getting a message and using those messages to guide your life versus we're just playing with it. You know, because I think if you're just playing with it, you know, it's not going to like bite you in the butt. But if you are looking for these spirits to guide you, you know, I mean, because a lot of the times like the lady with the automatic writing. She said that it was Michael the Archangel she was talking to.
How does she know?
Well, that was kind of my point. Well, she figured out that it wasn't Michael the Archangel she was talking to. It was some nasty guy from Zeta Reticula. I like to blame Zeta for.
Right. Blame him for all. That's a big problem, and because these boards are sold in toy stores, and I don't think so
Well,
much.
you can get the Jesus Ouija board now.
Oh boy.
Oh,
See,
you haven't seen that one? And it actually is a real thing. It wasn't some like made up thing, but it's like the letter thing, and like the planchettes are crossed and has Jesus on the box. And I'm like, okay.
yeah, I have an issue with things like that if you don't know what you're doing. And I'm not going to ditch the board specifically. I truly believe that it is the intention to communicate, whether you use a Ouija board, a pendulum, a ghost box, a voice recorder, a telephone app, whatever the case may be. If you are putting it out there, and the attention to communicate with something, with whatever avenue you're going to focus on, careful what you wish for.
So, and this person has 180 degrees change, but I'm not going to mention her name just out of respect, but she was the angel lady, and her thing was, if there's stuff going on, call your angels in and have them help you. And I mean, this book came out a while back, and, I have always said, no, you don't want to do that. Because if you're in a bad triggered place, which is making you more vulnerable right there. So when we're triggered, we're in a negative place. So we're all like, in our socks with them rolled down so we can see. And now I call my angels in. But it might be Fred the janitor from Zeta Reticula saying he's Archangel Michael, while we're down here. But then when we come back into our, sorry.
No, I love it. Go crazy.
When we come back into our whole present being,
Right.
we discover that, that was really Fred the janitor.
Right.
But we've already given it permission and access. And so she would be like, oh, you're having a bad day, calling your angels. And I'm like, don't do it. Only call your angels in when you're in a whole clear place so you can have a relationship with them. Because when you're in a bad place, you don't know what you're calling. You can say, oh, Archangel Michael, come, but it doesn't mean that Archangel Michael is going to show up.
No, exactly. I think there are a lot of spirits out there who are wandering, who want attention. There's so many mimics out there on different levels. And that's why I always say, careful what you wish for, because you just may get it, and you just may get it in a way that you don't necessarily want it, which makes it a little bit harder to get rid of them. So what do you do? In this case, you've got somebody with 7. What do you do? How do you get rid of them?
I mean, so when I was working with her, we got rid of 6 of them, 5 or 6 of them, and it just left the big kahuna. But in the meantime, she created, or they created, a portal.
Oh boy.
So it wasn't like the bugs, that were coming through interdimensional. This was a portal that there was just like a giant door that was open, and we were working on that. But I'm going to kind of back the conversation up.
Of course, it's your show. I'm just following along.
Well, no, but I think this is a big piece, a very important piece of information.
Okay.
So unless you have a certain kind of behavior, okay, so like the dissociation, the over-reliance on something outside of yourself, it is really hard to get an entity attachment. The most common place where people get an entity attachment is in childhood. And they usually are people that are trauma survivors, because they want someone to save them. And the entity helps them cope and navigate life. The second most common place is through some kind of an addiction, which obviously you get later on in life, alcohol, drugs, gambling, computers, sex, whatever is going to keep you in that cycle, and then there are certain behaviors, doing the automatic writing, where you inadvertently invite them in. And so if you're just like a regular working stiff, normal person, you go to a cemetery, you're part of a ghost hunting team, you're probably not going to end up with an attached entity. I mean, I get a lot of fear from people. Oh, well, I didn't do a cleanse when I came back from that ghost hunt. And now, granted, sometimes things follow you home.
Oh, they sure do.
They don't
sure do.
Say what?
They sure do. I've seen it happen so many times. Oh my God.
But they don't stay forever.
Right.
And
they're grounded to a spot for a reason, right?
Well, and they're there. The attached entity does not want you to know it's there, because you spoil their game if they're there, because now you can sit there and start doing stuff to get rid of them. So they rather play in the background and not be observed.
What about like energy? For example, women going through menopause. There's a really big theory. Women going through menopause, children, male or female, going through puberty, because of the big swing in emotions, as emotional changes. What kind of attachment, if you get an attachment, because it attracts things to come into this big energy swing, what kind of an attachment would you end up with if?
And I don't think you would get an attachment, because it's usually tied to a very specific kind of emotion. So even like the automatic writing lady, one of her issues was that she really couldn't like own her own thoughts, and she always had to look outside of herself for guidance. So she didn't like trust herself, and so that's what she needed to learn how to do. Now, with the teenagers and the menopausal women, I could see more poltergeist kind of activity happening.
Yeah.
Than an attachment issue.
Oh, my daughter.
I've never
like nobody's business.
I mean, I don't think I've ever met anybody that, just got one. There's usually something else tied to it.
I think an emotional state of mind could definitely, I mean, personally, just from, decades of working with people, and just because I'll ask, like, what did you do differently in your life? Like, you just wake up one day and there it was, like, I mean, so either something was laying in wait for a very long time through specific, right? Okay.
No, I see where you're going.
Take that one. Yeah.
And many times it can be, well, no. I mean, and I'm talking about like what I've seen in the more general sense. I have seen people get an entity in the hospital.
That's
but again, if they're in the hospital, they are in an altered emotional state, and it can happen. Usually, though, those are pretty. They're more like Klingons than these hardcore,
energy sucking. Yeah,
that are next to impossible to get rid of. Especially the ones that people pick up in childhood. Because you just assume, I'm mean, and I mean, I don't even care. You sit there and you tell your story so much, it's like you don't even care. Okay, believe this or not, but growing up, I was a bully.
No. Little Rita Louise.
Okay, and part of it was because I wasn't able to speak. I mean, I could talk, but I had a lot of trauma around that part, and I was very shy. But it didn't stop me from punching you in the face.
Terrible.
And so, I always thought that I was just very angry, but really something would happen and I would get triggered. Now the entity is there riling me up,
Mm-hmm.
and sending me down. And so that was kind of the output
Mm-hmm.
of this whole experience. And it took a long time for me to recognize that. Well, once I left my parents' house, a few years later, I'm like, you're really not an angry person at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Mm-hmm. No, because you're saying you're being a bully, and they're feeding off of you, and so you're getting angry. Now you're getting backlash. You're getting in trouble now,
Mhm.
because you're being hauled into the office, or you're being having to deal with your parental units saying, "Hey, you can't do things like this." So now, like this entity is getting a full array
Mhm.
of different
Right.
energy and emotions.
It had a smorgasbord.
Right, right. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. Okay.
But it's your belief, because I had it for so long, it
Mhm.
becomes part of your belief of who you are.
Mhm.
So you sit there and go, well, that's really not me. And you can
Mhm.
start making separation from it.
Right. Right.
But like when you pick up an entity in the hospital, and I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
they usually tend to be really easy to shake off. These are ones that are just usually like looking for some attention. They want some help. They're ready to transition, but don't know how. Um,
I'll tell your story and give me your thoughts on this. I spoke to an individual a few years ago, and he was in the hospital, and he claims he saw a shadow, some sort of of something crawl. It wasn't even a shadow. It was whatever it was. It was this black goo sort of thing. It was crawling across the ceiling, and it was making its way down towards this 18-year-old kid. And he said, I yelled out in my mind, and I said, no, 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 don't, like, come to me instead. And the thing shifted, came back towards him, and from that point on, his life it spiraled down, and he basically ended up with, like, all kinds of, like, addictions and ailments. And so by being the good Samaritan in this case, he brought it on to himself.
he invited it.
Yeah, I am. But the thing is, you had this unsuspecting kid who wasn't just bringing on a spirit individual, like, he was bringing on something. Like, what the heck was that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Say, yes.
I can see it,
Hmm.
you know. So
Yeah, yeah, it's a whole lot of craziness.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that,
Mhm.
there's not a lot of literature, and and
Mhm.
it's all misinformation. So
That's a real big one as well. I mean, but again, you're in this field, like, when you can attach, let's say, psychological information to it, medical information to it. I think parapsychology fits into that, trying to make that, no, that's the sensible stuff. But realistically, it's something that's pretty much out there. I don't think there are any real answers to it. And even if you get there, you still may not get all the answers to it.
mhm.
So you have to coast through life, all these unsuspecting people. How do you, because people, like, I'll back up, people want to communicate with the otherworldly, especially if you lose someone. You want so desperately to communicate with your loved one last time, or maybe get a message, or give me a little hint. Maybe that little hint is a bird, a hint of perfume. Or And then you have things that are kind of like, oh, I'll give you something. It's that careful what you wish for thing. How do you know what you are dealing with? Like, how do you safely communicate, or should you?
So this is the Dr. Rita rule for Dr. Rita. You all can do whatever you want, you know. So I mean, Thursday night I do Thursday Night Live with Dr. Rita Louise, and I do free on-air readings. And so and I have a question. There's a chat in Rumble now. I mean, because I stream to Rumble, but
Yes. Yes, there is. It will come in if you can stream to Rumble. I was getting all kinds of chats on a few occasions coming up in here, and they were coming right to the soundboard. to this
I
soundboard.
have to go check that out. I didn't even know that there was a chat.
I didn't either, much to my surprise. I'm like, is that somebody talking to me from Rumble? And it was, yes.
All right, cool. Because I like Rumble too. Okay,
Yes.
so on the show, when I first started, I started it out where people could ask questions, but it was a little too challenging for people.
There you
But
go.
inevitably, it's like,
Rumble. Right there.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Right.
You know, people would want to sit there and go, are there any messages for me?
Mhm.
You know, or what about my mom? And I have a, for me, very hard rule. And I don't talk to dead people, period. It's like, you can, now I'll do the ghost hunting and interact with the ghost there. But the ghost, Mark, hey, Mark. You know, and the ghost can be at your house and I'll talk to your ghost. But in order to do mediumship, in my mind, I have to like have your ghost come sit in the chair next to me so I can have a conversation with them. I don't want them in my house. I don't want them near me. They can be
my
in your house.
space.
They need to stay at your house.
Right.
You can follow me home, but you need to go back. That's the rule.
Wow.
And
see,
so,
I wouldn't even say you could follow me home. That'd be a freaking.
well, I don't say. All right, cancel that thought.
Yeah, you know.
But you know, and every so often, you know, I'll be doing a reading for someone, and you know, their mom shows up, you know, and I don't sit there and have a heart attack. It's like, oh, well, your mom showed up, you know, but I do not actively call them to me. You know, and I think part of it is because of my own attachment experience. And so when I was writing Dark Angels, I was married at the time and we divorced. And I picked it up to work on it some more. And I'm working on it and there was some noise and I'm in bed. And I look up from the bed and my little psychic brain came on. And there were all these freaking ghosts at the foot of the bed. And I'm like, oh no. And I put that book back away.
That'll do. That'll do.
No.
Wow. It's like everybody seemed to, come around and say, oh, Dr. Reed is writing a book.
It's like, I don't want to see you.
No.
I want to look at you. If you're around me, I don't even want to know. Wait, I gotta tell you. So I'm doing my live stream. So I used to do it in my office upstairs and I had a green screen, but that computer's not working that good. And I had to do 2 computers. It was a pain. And well, because StreamYard didn't like that computer because it runs Windows 7. And it just really didn't like it. Anyway.
Right.
So I'm doing the live stream, and after a friend of mine who does ghost hunting said there was some man in your office talking. And another friend that, like, because all 3 of us are friends, she goes, yeah, I heard it too. And I'm like, I don't even want to know about it. And then the next week she goes, that man was there. I'm like, I don't even want to know about it. It's like, if he wants to be there and he wants to talk, that's fine. But I don't want to know about it because it's just going to scare me.
No. How does it scare you when you can see them and you can hear them? And because you could see them, right?
Because then they do things like they slam doors, which scares me. And, you know, it's like, it's the weird incidental noises that get me the most.
Yeah. Well, you know, you could have, this is something I've always said. People have said to me, you know, are you scared? And I'm just like, no, but I startle. I can startle like everybody else. I'd startle if you jumped out from around a corner at me the same way I would if anything else would. I've been rushed by things you can't see. And I've heard footsteps going boom, 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 boom. And I'm see myself going, where's it coming from? And boom, 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 boom. And it speeds up. And it landed right beside me. And this big puff of dirt, because it was a really old lodge, so it was just like it was abandoned, and we had permission from the people who own the island to be there because it was some 1920s big, like everybody went to this place, and it landed, and I could see the floor go like this, the wood floors, and all of this dust came up. I'm covered in dust. You know, and I'm thinking, you bastard. It just rushed me and it just landed almost on top of me. I had to dive bomb out of the way. So they have fun with that. I'm sure they have fun with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see your point. I knew it was coming. I still wasn't ready for it. So I don't know. So, okay, note to self, no interacting or communicating with ghosts. Aside from
If
investigating
the ghosts are in
within
your
space,
house, I'm
in your
happy about that. I don't
Right.
have an issue going to your house and like talking.
Right. No, it's just within our own space. We
Mhm.
shouldn't, because it's sort of like making these invitations. I've
Okay.
heard that, like how you should never do EVPs in your own home. That's a big one, and with
I've
paranormals.
never heard that, but I like that idea.
Well,
Like, it's like my girlfriend wanted to come. The two of them wanted to come and do an event, and I'm like, no.
mhm,
So I live in a house. So my house, not the house I'm working on, but my house
mhm,
was built in like 1920.
mhm,
I'm the third owner of the house,
mhm.
and so every surface had freaking wallpaper on it. So I opened the house up and I said, anybody that wants to come over and do an investigation, this is your one and only chance, because I just bought the house. And I go, and the payment for doing the overnight is you have to strip some wallpaper.
Everybody leave with a sheet. Yeah.
Well,
Two
and it was
room,
like
two room.
all I wanted was like, just a chunk, and you didn't have to get on a ladder. It was just however tall you were, just do whatever that is, and because there was a lot of freaking wallpaper everywhere, and and that was the price of admission,
Mhm.
and that's the only people, and I've had other people say, well, we'd love to come and set up at your house. I'm like, nope.
Yeah. See, I agree with that. I had a client one time. Her husband passed away. She started doing EVPs. And then all of a sudden things started to escalate, and she ended up with a voicemail, back in the old tapes. And she said, you need to come and like, I'm very frightened. I said, okay. Luckily she was in the same city. So I go, okay, I'll go. And she played this recording of something growling at her, just name calling her. She goes, I need to know if that's my husband. Did he like you? Like, I don't mean to sound like I'm like, insensitive, but I mean, exactly did your husband talk to you? And I'm sure he didn't growl at you. Whatever it was just really malevolent sounding. And she says, well, I do these recordings as I'm trying to capture his voice. I'm like, what you've done is
But
brought
it's
something
like,
else in.
but that is the same exact, that is perfect. It's the same exact mentality of doing the Ouija board. It's the
Yes.
same exact mentality of doing the automatic writing. It's like you're going out there wanting something from the spirit world.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what I was saying
You got
earlier.
some
A
ground
voice recorder, right? You're
that-
putting it out there, intention. It took her 2 years, and she completely, things got so bad. At one point, I got a message, and she wanted to get into information about necromancing and wanted assistance in bringing him forward. I'm like, I draw the line at that kind of stuff. No, thank you. So, but that goes to show how it can take you into some very, very dark places that
Mhm.
you might not always be able to come back from something like that.
It takes a lot.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of people will just sit there and say, "Oh, well, I got a healing and it didn't work," and it's like, well, it takes more than that, because
Mhm.
again, there's a psychological element that's tied to it.
Mhm.
This woman wanted to connect with her husband. I mean, that's a psychological element.
Yes. 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 It was really, really bad. I really felt for her, because you walk in and you just felt the heaviness, and you felt like it was just something there with a lot of really bad intentions, and it just got worse and worse and
Mhm.
worse. but the recordings never stopped. They just went, and it's just like they were going on websites. Like she was, it was just like really like a massive amount of recordings that she was like sending out to these websites and such, and they were encouraging it because they're like, well, we're an EVP organization, we'll help you. No, no, like you're enabling a grieving individual, and grieving in itself can bring on an attachment.
Low energy. You're in a bad emotional place.
Yes.
When we're in a bad emotional place, our auric field gets thin, so our layer of protection is weaker. Because when we're in the present moment, when we're in the here and now, we are whole, we are solid. You can tell someone to take a leap because we're present. But when we're having any kind of emotional challenge going on, we are not in that place. And again, she was doing it in her house for somebody that she wanted. And there's a whole different thing of going to someone else's house and doing it on a third party, because now you don't have any emotional attachment to it. Like, I don't care if he shows up or not. If he does, that's great. And I can go home. For her, it's like, oh, he didn't come. Well, maybe I should try again. Oh, he doesn't love me because he didn't come tonight. It just takes it into a whole different level of psychology.
Well, it does. I mean, when you have your loved one's vehicle still sitting there locked up in a garage, and like I've worked with different families who experienced grieving, and one they just locked up the car, and they never ever went into it again. It took years for them to finally decide we're going to sell the car because of the smells and everything was still inside of it. And that seems to be the key thing, holding on to that smell just locked up. I cannot tell you how many times I've experienced that working with grieving people. So
would not be my problem.
So how do you cleanse? How do you get rid of these Klingons, these attachments? What's the best way? Aside, grounding is always a good thing. It makes it a little bit harder for things to attach in the first place.
Okay, so when this is going to sound terrible, when I have someone come to me and say, I have an attached entity and I need for you to deal with it, I automatically put them in we'll look and see. And they don't like that, because if you're sitting there running around going, I have an entity attachment, I'm going to say 80% of the time you don't, because they don't want you to know. And the only way I figured out that I had an entity attachment was that I got a reading and somebody told me about it. And then I started paying attention. I'm like, holy crap. You're right. I could feel them, and so usually they don't know, or they've heard something, and then they put the dots together. So if the person has an addiction issue, the easiest way to get rid of the attachment is to stop the addictive behavior, because they only come out when the addictive behavior is being presented. If it is, so there is like figuring out what's going on, and then, it's a process, and it's, I tell people that it's really easier, better to get, and I'm going to say professional assistance on it, because why is the entity attached? Is it firmly attached? Is it not firmly attached? And kind of like getting the lay of the land, to what's going on. And
so you got to look at the cause and go to the root of the cause of why it would be here, and work on that, like the ends to the means, figure out the means, change the ending, essentially.
But when we're talking about like the alien entities or the interdimensionals, I don't get. Like where did they come from and how do you get rid of them?
That's
I got nothing.
really.
I mean, I'm more of a psychological and working with the person and doing work with the entity, because I'll do counseling with the entity and healing work on the entity so it can like leave. I have worked with, all right, I haven't worked with, I have done sessions for people who have had what I actually put into the demonic category.
Right.
Not very many. I do not deal with them.
That's all I've dealt with for the most part.
It's
people believing that they have.
But it's not people believing that. It's people just having that. And you have to, you really. So there was that recent movie, The Exorcist, that had Russell Crowe in it. And I have this friend, I watched that movie and it reminded me of my friend because that was his attitude, just being very strong and you're not going to cross my boundaries. And I don't deal with entities that way. I'm more of like, okay, well, let's like move you out and I'm more of a healer versus that. But sometimes people have a demonic entity and it needs that kind of attention, not necessarily, in the name of Jesus Christ, no. But it needs to have that kind of fortitude. All right, a quick story. So again, not that many people with demonic entities, but I had this lady call and she was talking about, and she sounded very frail and very afraid and very meek. That was how she sounded. And that people didn't like her. And there would be times where it's like she would look in the mirror and it didn't even look like her. And her boss didn't like her, but like, because she would like become this different person. I mean, those were her words, and I wish I could like remember the whole lead up. And I'm looking at her going, okay, that's because you got this freaking demonic entity. And it was like not just hanging out in her auric field, it was actually like coming into her body. So it was kind of a possession kind of situation. Although it left her with enough cognitive ability that it could be her. Like she could track what was going on in her life.
Yes.
She wasn't totally dissociated. So I refer her to this friend of mine, the Russell Crowe kind of guy. And, but he has a job and, she calls him. Well, he doesn't call her back right away. And I am out shopping and I get this phone call. So I answer the phone. And it's this lady, but she was like, your friend never called me. And I was like,
all right. Yeah.
Okay. I said, well, you know what? Give me a chance and I will call him right now and have him call you. That lady's entity just called me up. You need to call her right now.
Right. I don't need any problems or house guests. Yeah.
No, it wasn't that. I've never had an entity call me.
Oh, I've had entities.
It was not this lady that I had to spend an hour on the phone with.
I'll give you a story. I was at a house that I investigated. Had they knew who I was, I knew who they were. So I'm home, and the homeowner calls me one day, and we start talking. She goes, "Oh, I just have to catch the postman. I'll have to drop off a letter. So I'm just going to put the phone." She's on a cordless phone too, right? So you get easy to tap into the channels. So she puts the phone down. I hear her put the phone down. It was a big old manor house as well. So went down and I heard her go back down the service stairs. I hear her talking outside to the postman. All of a sudden, her dogs, much like yours, start losing their freaking minds in the house. And I'm going, wow, okay. So I'm just sitting there. All of a sudden, something picks up the phone. I could hear it. And The dogs are going crazy, and it gets in there and starts growling at me and calls me an F and C. Do you know the best I could come up with? I never had that happen to me in my life. That was my break-in. Broken in that moment. I went, you have a potty mouth. That is the freaking best I could come up with. Potty mouth. Okay. And it didn't know what to say. And it went, rah. And it dropped the phone. I could hear the phone go boom. So 2 minutes later, she goes, what is going on? The dog's losing her mind. Oh, I will tell you what's going on. You got a shithead living in your house. Like, it was just crazy. And the thing started calling all the time, growling at me, freaking like the phone would be beside me. It never rang. I pick it up and there's a voice message. So how does that happen?
Send it to my house. I don't want it, don't want it, don't want it.
Man, dead things have called me in the past, but that was it for me. I was kind of like, wow, that's great. So how do you explain that? Do you want to try?
I'm just like,
I know. I totally get it. So I like the whole logical side of everything, but every now and then you come across something that's sort of like, okay, that was different. Because they like to throw the C word around like nothing.
I think because of my whole I don't want you in my house thing, that my whole house is kind of protected,
Yeah.
I mean, because it really is a hard rule, although I do have an exception story. So in my house, if you were in the kitchen, there was like a galley kitchen with like a eating countertop thing. And if you kept going, you walked into my office thing. And my desk was over to the right of this glass room. And Bitsy, my last poodle, the one with the tinfoil hat that you see on my Facebook profile, the superstar. She is on the top of the sofa and she's just barking, which meant she was awake, which was kind of rare. So I go in there and I pick her up and I'm petting her and whatever. And I let her go and she gets back on the sofa and she's barking over there in this walkway by the kitchen. So I look over and there was some guy standing in the kitchen. It wasn't the dead guy from the backyard. Okay, but see, you'll appreciate, no, it gets better. Yeah, and you'll appreciate this story because you're weird like me.
Yeah.
And I call my husband. Hey, there's a dead guy standing in the kitchen. Do you have any idea who it is? And he goes, no. And I'm like, okay. And I hang up. So I just ignore the dead guy. And I go in my office. And so like the next day or 2 days later, my son comes in and he's standing like the door is here, but he came through the door. He's standing in front of my desk in line with the door. And he starts talking to me. And then he stops and turns his head and he goes, who's the guy in the kitchen? And I'm like, I don't know. Do you? And he looked at me and he goes, I've been hanging around you entirely too long, and walked out of the room.
Wow. There's some family love right there.
But he's the one that used to see the dog in the hallway.
Right. So he could see things, which was
they both could see things, and now they don't really pay attention to it, which is sad.
Well, this is like not every. I call them drive-bys. They sort of stop by and that's it. But a little support would be nice. That same thing that got me on the phone that one time decides to call my house. My former husband at the time picks up the phone. I'm peeling potatoes, doing my domestic duty. So peeling potatoes didn't happen often. I don't really like cooking much. Anyway, picks up the phone and I hear this growling. So I'm sitting there going, waiting to see what's going to happen next. He goes, it's for you. What did you think the growly thing is for me? So anyway, I just said, okay, well, I'm just got to wash my hands. Just talk to it for a minute. I'll be right there. He goes, not happening. That was the end of that. So it's like, okay. So yeah, not a lot of support. It's for you. Here it goes.
All right, that's
No.
pretty good.
I know. I have to admit that was definitely a good time. He'd see something one time, same house, right? Something goes floating by the master bedroom, and he stops. He looks at it. It's just like some floaty light thing. It wasn't an orb. It was just like some crazy thing. And he goes, "Stop bringing your work home." What the hell did you just say to me? Yeah. So there's good stories along with and again, it could be good because, we're amongst, some of our weird friends
Mhm.
we can share this with. But anyway, yeah, those are the kind of things that, I inadvertently attract for whatever reason. So this is a part of the show. Tell us what you have coming up, where to find you, any projects coming up, the drill.
Okay, so the best way to find me is by going to my website, which is soulhealer.com, and it's on that thing on the bottom. And it has my books. So I've written 7 books. This is just one of them, and they cover topics from ancient mysteries to, I want to say, health and healing, but it's more like health and healing from a psychic perspective, as well as my bestseller, The Dysfunctional Dance of the Empath and Narcissist. And my newest book, Dang, It Was Me All Along. Tons of articles, stuff. There's stuff. It's a worthwhile perusal if you're into this kind of thing.
Right.
And all of my books are available on Amazon. I have some videos on Amazon as well. On Thursday nights, I do my Thursday Night Live with Dr. Rita Louise. And guess what, Michelle?
What?
That's
What?
me.
You're what?
That's me.
That's me.
Anyway, it's
Minus the paint fumes.
7 p.m. Central, so it's right before Michelle's. I stream to YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble, but I haven't really been promoting Rumble because I didn't know that you could do the chat. I've been telling people to go. I'm gonna have to investigate that. I've been telling people to go to YouTube because it's easy to find me. It's Just Energy Radio, so 3 words, Just Energy Radio on YouTube. And you can join the chat. And I usually talk about some topic. Like for the last 4 weeks, I did a whole presentation on reptilians. It was a 15-minute chunk every week. This week, we talked about Medicare.
Yay. Yay, you.
No, like the Medicare scam. It's a freaking scam.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Anyway.
Right.
You think it's going to be free, but it's not. Pay more, get less. That's my slogan for Medicare. Pay more, get less.
Right.
And then I open up for the chat, and you can get a free on-air reading. I do little card readings for people, and it's fun. And you get to hang out with me, and I'm pretty much like this all the time.
See, that's fantastic. I love it. And you're back on January 30th.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. So, guys, mark your calendars for more Dr. Rita because it's just going to be fantastic. It's always a blast. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight and talking about this. 'Tis the season, and I like the different perspective of it as well. And I think
I just love hanging out with you. So,
thank you. Yeah, we'll do it again for sure. You bring the pizza rolls. I'll bring the wine. So,
well, usually I eat pretty healthy, but I'm like, it's already 8 o'clock, and I message you, and you didn't get back to me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna throw some pizza. This is like emergency food. I'm just gonna throw some pizza rolls in the air fryer, and as soon as I put them in the air fryer, my computer went ding, and I'm like, that's Michelle.
Sorry, but go ahead, indulge, enjoy. We're so laid back over here, doesn't matter. Dogs are barking. We've had guests that are cats and running around and scream. It's like, right on, whatever. Just have fun. That's what it's about. So no problem. But I hope you have a terrific I guess holidays, because by the time I see you, you're going to be going through Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's.
And Halloween. Don't
And
forget
Halloween.
Halloween.
Oh, that's the best one. Halloween's a lifestyle for some of us.
Mhm.
So that's a holiday. Yeah, one of my favorites. So actually, but thank you. It was a
Thank
pleasure,
you.
and I'm really looking forward to our next one.
Yay.
Yahoo. So everybody in chat, thank you all for tuning in. You just make it that much more fun. Just so you all know, it's just like having just like a little party all right here in the sound room. So thank you, Dr. Rita. Thank you to our sponsors, Folgers Coffee, Justin Snicker, Steve McGinnis, we appreciate you all so very much. Next week, Wednesday night, welcomes Eric Mintel, who's going to be discussing pretty much everything high strangeness, paranormal, cryptids, dogman, you betcha. Love it. Thursday welcomes the return of my friend Jack Roth, who's going to be discussing one of his books, Ghost Soldiers of Gettysburg. Just kind of keeping in tune with spooky month. So I know. So come in, tune in. And until then, we shall see you guys next week. Yes, we love high strangers as well, Richard. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And good night, everyone.